Hey everyone, this is the very first RCGroups Hangout. This is a live video chat. It's also going to be included as our podcast, so you can listen to us on iTunes if you don't want to see video and just want to hear our amazing voices online. Right now we're sitting with Jim Bourke, owner-operator of Bourke Enterprises, LLC, Jason Cole, and Matt Gunn. We all work together as a team here on RCGroups and Flying Giants. And I thought what we would do is talk about our hobby in general, but also go into some detail on our personal thoughts on the FAA regulations, where we're at with that, and what that means to us.
How you doing, guys?
So does anyone have a hot smoking feeling about the FAA regulations and what that means to us as modelers?
Man.
You know, I'm really torn. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, it's such a broad topic and go in so many different directions. But please, Jason, start with what tears you about it?
Well, so I can see both sides of all the arguments. Some people are like, "Oh, it's no big deal. It's only $5 or free if you register in the first 30 days." And then there's the guys like, "This is the worst thing that could ever happen to us." So I try to keep an even kill, I'd say, and I don't have a solid opinion really. On one hand, it doesn't really matter to me. The $5 isn't such a big deal to register for 3 years. My information, even though people are like, it's on a public database, I don't really worry about that getting out there too much. It's just my name and address, which you can get just about anywhere else. And you have to have the registration number in order to even search that database to find somebody's personal information. So I'm not too worried about that. But then the other side, I'm just like, forget you, FAA. I don't need to register to fly my hobby aircraft. You know, this is like, why are you making us do this? So I'm just so split on the issue. What do you guys think?
I'm not split. I can see why someone could become split, and I think that the way that people become split is they look at it from the wrong direction. And it's what happens is you can look at it and say, well. I want to be reasonable, and I want to make sure that people feel safe, and that's it's an okay direction to look at it. But it's the wrong direction for us because what we want to do is promote the hobby, and we have to think of what would promote the hobby the most. Any kind of registration or a fee in some way, maybe a small way, diminishes the hobby, diminishes the participation. If the fee were a penny, it would have the same effect as a $5 fee. It's not about the amount. So I don't think that's that's a matter of degree. But a fee of, let's say, $10, $20, a fee of a penny, it's really the process of paying that's the barrier. And that hurts the hobby. So for that reason, I'm just very strongly against a fee. When it comes to registration, there are so many things of real danger that you can participate in and purchase that require no registration and would be, the idea of registration would be offensive to a lot of people. There would be great support for being against registration of a whole bunch of things, a whole class of things that are dangerous. That it's bothersome that we have to face that with what's really a very, rewarding and safe hobby that people have been participating in for a long time without causing any trouble to anybody, and for the most part still are doing. So I'm just going to say I'm just one of these people that's just very much against it. Now I think that if that gets clouded when we talk about it in public with people on the internet, because they sometimes can't find the right words, and so what they do instead is they sort of project in the future, and they have this attitude about the big brother, and then all these things in government, and they kind of go on a tear. And when they do that, it sort of makes it feel like, well, to side with this being against it, I've kind of positioned myself to be in this crowd of people who are reacting really emotionally. Okay, so we don't want to do that. Life will go on. We will of course obey the law. We will, and the law will survive. With that law. That's just being mature about the issue. But that doesn't mean that we should be okay with it. We should be upset about it.
And I think the community is, by and large, upset about it. And, I think a lot of us were, maybe, not in a good way relying on the AMA to kind of fight for our rights as modelers instead of sticking up for ourselves. And luckily, there is one guy that has done that and is filed a lawsuit against the FAA. So I'm excited about that and see where that is going to head.
I don't know how that'll work out. Typically with these things, what happens is the government. We're not the first people to face this. This is a very common thing, and it has to do with the fight we all have to be engaged in to figure out what level of control society should have on each other and all that. It's a really complicated subject. The way it usually plays out is the government makes a rule. They do it all the time. They do it every year, all year round. They make rules of all sorts that affect all kinds of people, a lot of which are just ignored. It's just a very common thing that happens. And what the government does in these situations is they allow people to ignore those rules, and then they pick somebody, a poor unfortunate person, and they apply the full weight of the law to that guy. And that guy gets all of it and makes an example that everyone reads about and hears about and says, oh, I better not be like that guy. I better obey the law. There's sort of this dance that goes on that makes it so that people obey the law because they're afraid of the repercussions that most people aren't really facing. With that in mind, you have to be very careful about how we accept into our lives these new laws. But at the same time, we can't expect that it won't happen. It's sort of just this process that has to go through, and through that process, we just kind of work out. The government sort of works out what really matters to it, and people kind of work out what really matters to it. And eventually, over time, prosecutors just stop taking, or not prosecutors, in this case, the FAA, just stops enforcing its own rule. And I really believe in the end, as I'm not trying to get us to be too complacent, but I believe in the end, this is headed in that direction. It's headed in the kind of direction to me where it's going to be this big thing we're all going to have to deal with, and then 5 or 10 years from now, we're not going to be thinking about it. Now, 10 years from now, somebody can look at this and say I was an idiot. So I have to be good. But this is all I'm just going back to the emotional part of it, because that's what's really getting people going crazy right now. It's just, what does this mean? Well, it might not mean very much. It might just be a step in the wrong direction that doesn't really mean very much overall.
Mm-hmm.
I personally don't have any issues with the registration or any of that, but what I do have an issue with is the things that I have to agree to when I give my $5 in information to the FAA. And the majority of these I personally don't care about, but the first one is fly below 400 feet. And so I would think if I was a DLG pilot or any kind of sailplane pilot that this would be an issue for me.
Yeah, but if you... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, that my other one is fly within line of sight. And my question immediately there is, does this mean that FPV is not legal in the eyes, or am I not following that regulation if I sign this? What does line of sight mean to the FAA?
Well, if you look at I don't know if Jim, if you can put up the link to showing a picture of what those rules are or anything. I don't have it right in front of me, but if you read it, they're not those aren't laws. Those are suggestions, if you will. It's not the law of the land that these are basically you're saying, yes, I agree to these this list of I don't want to say demands, but they are like a list that says I won't do this and I won't do this, and I will stay line of sight, fly under 400 feet. But they're not laws. Now, could that be used against you? Let's just say you did get into a sticky situation where you crashed your airplane, into a courthouse building or something like that. Yes, those, a court of law or even a civil case, they could argue that you signed here stating that you would fly within line of sight and you didn't. But it's not a law. Those aren't. I mean,
Right.
There is no ban on FPV. There's nothing that makes FPV illegal on that specific page by signing up with the FAA.
It does say strongly encouraged. So
There you
right.
go.
Well, the law, it's very tricky. Jason brought up that someone's suing the FAA. And what will happen here is, I don't know how that'll work, but what will happen is somebody will have a fine applied to them. And that'll be the person that really gets to test this all out. And the FAA, because of the way that government agencies work, they'll just, like I said, apply the law with full force to somebody. And they'll just kind of be in their own heads, well, I wonder if this is going to work for us. I don't know what we're supposed to be doing here. Is this what people are really going to accept? So they do that, and then it ends up going to the courts because somebody defends himself. As for what the laws actually are, it's extremely unclear. As a business owner in this industry, I can tell you it is really difficult for me to figure out what I'm supposed to do, and I would like to comply with every law because I don't want to be in trouble with the government because it would really damage my business. In this case, it's really tricky. I have a registration process that we have to go through, I guess, as a company. We have, I don't know how many RC models in this company, and they are shared by everybody. They can't personally register each one. I guess they could.
And the company Jim is talking about is Knife Edge Software, right, Jim?
Yeah, Knife Edge Software and RCGroups, but particularly Knife Edge Software, where I'm the headquarters, which I'm in right now. And how do we comply with this rule? Does everyone get a registration? Everybody puts their registration number on the aircraft? Not only that, but what rules do apply? If these are aircraft, I am a commercial pilot of full-scale aircraft. A lot of people know I fly in aerobatic competitions, do some air shows and things. And boy, there's a lot of rules about that. If we start applying the federal aviation regulations completely, then by that argument, everyone who works for me who's flying a model airplane would need a commercial pilot's license. Now this goes back, way back, some of this, to at the very beginning when the AMA wrongly, very wrongly, and a lot of modelers, but particularly AMA, wrongly took the position that we would get out of all this by just saying, well, we're not commercial users. Let's make sure the law just addresses commercial use. That's a mistake. It was always a mistake. And unfortunately, because people are so ready to throw commercial users of anything under the bus, business users of anything under the bus, as a small business owner, I'm just going to make my case. Because they're so ready to do that, they don't understand how the government understands what commercial activity is to begin with. Commercial activity of an aircraft includes things like you going with me to another place in my airplane that I was going to anyway, and you paying for fuel. That is commercial use. Commercial use is extremely broad, and that's because aviation is intensely regulated. The purpose of the Federal Aviation Administration is to make it so people can get onto the big steel tubes and fly in the sky from one city to another, a bunch of other people, and know with 100% certainty almost that they're going to get there in one piece of all craft. That's what they do. And that's what the FAA understands as commercial. And if you think about the restrictions they place on commercial activity there, in the minds of the regulator, someone who's tasked with enforcing this, it's very hard for them to make a distinction once that's opened up to models. It's just that it's their aircraft, and they all those rules, as far as many of those people are concerned, apply. I know I'm going on a little bit too long here, but I will grant that most of the people in the FAA, of course, are good people who understand common sense and will look at those laws and realize, well, that's obviously not what's intended. They're not going to spend their time going out and trying to prosecute somebody. But it still matters that that's what the laws say, and it still matters for someone who's trying to follow them that I can't make sense of what I'm required to do. And it still matters that there are people at the FAA, only a few, who are both empowered and dumb enough. It's true, because I've seen this, I've watched this in action, who can then go and do create this hardship, the horrible hardship on individual people that they decide to pick on. It happens. So I want to give the time for everybody. But that's the thing about the law that's confusing me and making it really scary for me right now. Is I just don't know how to follow it. I don't know what it means. I don't know what they really want. I don't know what and it goes back to what they're trying to accomplish. I don't understand that. I don't even know what their goal is right now. I can't really say it's about restricting or about limiting problems. It seems like it's more of just a very highly emotionalized response to an emotionalized reaction on the part of the population and an emotionalized reaction on the part of the people in government. And that's not going to get us anywhere. So that sort of sums it up to me.
We were talking about where this came from yesterday, and my theory is that somebody on high said, we need a solution, and we need it before Christmas. And this is what they whipped up to lay before us before Christmas came, and all the quads were given as gifts.
Yeah, the same number of quads were given as gifts last year, it seems like. It was just as big last year at Christmas as it was this year and all year long. And if you look back 3 years ago or so at the Notice for Proposed Rulemaking, the NPRM, this was the commercial aspect of it that was the FAA was trying to get together for years and years. And they actually had the NPRM misometer that was running. That was originally they wanted to have these rules for commercial UAV operations in place a few years ago, and they just kept missing it and missing it because they didn't know how to combat this industry, how to group these model aircraft with real aircraft and rules and regs and such. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they say, hey, forget the commercial aspect. Let's just take the entire hobby aspect of it, which is just as dangerous now, and we're going to put something together in the next 30 days, and that's going to be the final say-so. And that's what they did. And so now it's still a running joke. The actual commercial aspect of it that, Jim, you were talking about, is still sitting in limbo. I mean, granted, you have a Band-Aid called 333 that allows anybody with a pilot's license to jump through hoops and fly commercially, but it isn't it is not the small UAS rule that is supposed to come out next year and next year and next year, and it's been ongoing. And so I think you're right. This is an emotional knee-jerk reaction, the registration process, and I am, Jason, you said you're sort of on the fence. Jim, you're okay with it, but it's got its problems. I staunchly disagree with it because it ropes in modelers that should not be in this whatsoever. People that are just flying line of sight at a field. People that should not have that pose no threat to the national airspace at all, and yet now they have to register with the Gov, and I think it's I hate to say it, but it's the first step towards more control over model aircraft. That's my opinion.
Well, yes. Please, Jim.
A flip side for me is, and this is kind of this is brand new, and I'm the first of 40,000 on the list. But if I do go register right now today, and there is an issue in a 10-mile radius from my house, I've heard reports of people having knocks on the door. And I don't want to be registering until I have to, because I don't want to be the guy that they go check on when they have a report of a drone in the air.
Yeah, and I think you'll be safe in registering because so many people, if people register, so many will register that there's safety and that they can't possibly task people with going to everyone's door and bothering them. And people don't want to. They're people, law enforcement, the last thing they want to do is go test model airplane. That's probably not very realistic that it'll be people hauled away in droves because of this expected register. But it doesn't do any good either.
And that was their whole reason for having registration in the first place, so there would be a number attached, and if something went wrong and they recovered that aircraft, then they would know whose it was.
Well, they also said that
only works if you get everybody to do it. And if anybody thinks, if everybody who has a drone does it, then the database has everybody. Because it's like $20 to buy a little drone. I guess it's a half-pound restriction, so maybe that doesn't apply. But, maybe it's not everybody, but it's so dang cheap to buy these things. There was a presidential visit in Eugene, which is, 30 miles away from me. And the ring of RC aircraft restriction, came close to Corvallis. It was a complete, absolute restriction on RC aircraft of any kind that was around that visit. And I'm sure that's the normal notice that's given out anytime the president goes anywhere. I never noticed it before, but I thought I would read it. Being a pilot, wanting to see what it actually said, being near the airspace. Well, it turns out you can't find any RC vehicles at all in the area. Now, does that mean that people actually pay attention to that and do that? No, not really. So I think it does go back to what are they trying to accomplish? What could it possibly be? A couple ways to look at it. One of them is they're extremely clever people, and they are making a registration process because it accomplishes something that they need to accomplish, which would be, let's brainstorm. It can't be about collecting information, everybody. That's crazy. There's too many people. It might be about prosecuting the guy who goes and flies into the jet engine in a 747. That makes sense if the label survives, I guess. Right. Could be about tracking down somebody who's just habitually kind of breaking the law. But it feels more like it's in the category of, well, we were supposed to do something. We really had to do something. And and this is a really hard problem. It turns out it's much harder than we thought it would be, and it's really easy if we do it really broadly. If we just say everything's an aircraft and dang it, they're all aircraft and that's that, it's easy. But nobody will let us do that. They won't let us do it the easy way. And maybe it's just easier to make a registration system. That makes everybody kind of gets them off our back. I mean, honestly, that might not have been a bad way to go about it. It just frustrates us because we're the ones who can register. But from their perspective, might have solved the problem for them.
Well, do you guys think that that FAA overstepped its reach and that Congress specifically prohibited this registration, or are they within their rights and by saying that we've been allowed to register model aircraft all along, we just haven't up until now? That's their argument.
Well, there's obviously some retconning, I think, or some revisionism in how the FAA is willing to look at things, and has been from the very beginning when they said that they said a long time ago that model aircraft have always been aircraft. Well, that's silly. Model cars aren't cars, and model aircraft aren't aircraft. And if they were, then we wouldn't have all this complication that would come in because they would have thought about all this stuff from the very beginning. They would have understood these problems from the beginning. So whether or not they have the authority to, hey, flat out, somebody in government has the authority. The government has authority over all kinds of stuff. I mean, I like that all the time, but somebody does. Who is it? It doesn't really matter to me. What matters to me is that what they create makes some sense. So I guess I'm not too agendized on whether it's the FAA that has authority or not. I do agree that the argument is valid that they don't, because they're not equipped for it, and Congress should create, or whatever. I don't know how that works, but there should be a group that's created that understands the subject. But in terms of which agency is the best able to deal with it right now, it probably is the FAA. It doesn't sound very good when I say that, but that probably is the best choice we have.
We were there all those years when the FAA would show up at Joe Knoll, and we would have an update on how they're working together with the AMA. And I don't know, Jason, how many years did we watch that happen? 3 years, maybe? They've been at Joe Knoll talking to us.
It's been a while. Mm-hmm.
And then to see them completely just take all consideration and thoughts from the AMA and dump them on the ground shows me that the FAA just doesn't care about any of that stuff.
Well, why did we ever imagine the AMA would be listened to anyway? What makes them special that they would be listened to, except that they are, a lot of us are members. Why would the FAA listen to them?
Yeah.
Who else do they listen to as the, as a group authority? Not authority, but the.
But if you look at it in a different way, with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms listen to the NRA. Is that how they would go about their job? I mean, it really isn't, right? I think that in some ways we've gotten used to the idea that the AMA is sort of this quasi-governmental group that kind of is sort of, or they're not. They never have been. It's a private group. We're all members. I think all.
They're an insurance company.
Yeah, I'm a life member. Well, I don't mean to mean that. I don't mean to say that they're not useful. They're very useful. They're very good for me. I'm glad to be a life member. But the perspective that the FAA would go, oh, well, we have to listen to those guys. That's just not the way that those things work. I don't know why we would think that.
And this is where I started to realize that if we wanted to let our voice be heard, we have this month 1.8 million unique users on RCGroups. And so we've been riding in that direction to get the word out, to let people know what's going on, to let them know how to go back in and make their opinions heard by the FAA. And is the largest RC site in the world, I think it's kind of one of our responsibilities just to make sure all that gets out there.
Yeah, and no one came asking for our opinion either, right? So it sort of goes by my point. Why would they care about what we have to say about it? From their perspective, we're just agendized because we're highly involved in supporting people who are participating in this activity. They want to possibly make it illegal. So from their perspective, we're not useful to the conversation. They might give us some time to discuss things because that helps them to say they've addressed, they've talked to everybody. But I just don't think it's. I'm not. That's not. By the way, I'm not an axe to grind about that. That's okay. That's probably appropriate. It's just I think really what we should base our expectations on the reality that they are trying to find a way to control this. They're not very interested in listening to ways to avoid that.
It is amazing that they're tasked to create a solution to something they really don't have any clue about. That's what blows me away.
I think the modelers don't help in some ways when we do say some things that are that we kind of take their position sometimes. We're talking about the 400-foot. I think Matt brought up the 400-foot altitude limit, or Jim did. Well, I've met so many modelers who think that's a really high altitude. That's funny to me. it's not that high.
It's not.
You can see a model many hundreds of feet. I mean, I used to spec out my hand launch for thermal sailplanes, and I don't know how many feet they were, but it's got to be well over 1,000 feet. They're fairly big airplanes. And as a pilot of real aircraft, I have never once ever thought about I might hit a kite or a model rocket or a model airplane. Never once have I concerned myself with that thought. So I don't really see a problem with all the drones either. I don't think I'm going to hit a drone. It's just the chances of that are extremely small. But sometimes modelers they get these ideas because they don't measure things. They don't know what the numbers really are. They don't realize how high they're flying. And they hear 400 feet or 500 feet or whatever a number would be, or 200 feet, and think, oh, that's probably high enough. Let's be reasonable here. But it changes the hobby dramatically to have, if we impose an actual altitude restriction, then it does change a lot of competition flying at the very least.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For FPV, I can live under 400 feet. And the thing about FPV is that you can look at your on-screen display and know how high you are, for a fact.
Well, that's exactly right. If I was, no one asked me, but if I was asked to address this problem in a way that's meaningful, then it would start with the idea that okay, these drones have in order to be a drone and be controlled by somebody who isn't experienced and hasn't devoted time to this hobby, they have to include a lot of electronics that also can be used, and this is where regulation works. This is how regulation is supposed to work. Creating a regulation that goes to the manufacturer and makes it a requirement of the manufacturer to prohibit a drone from doing something it's not supposed to do is a much more approachable problem than it is to control literally millions of people that are going to their backyard with something they bought online or overseas, who knows where, and it's just going to do whatever they want with it. I mean, that's an unbelievably difficult problem to solve.
There you go.
Yeah, I don't understand why they're approaching it from the direction they are at all. Besides the fact that they're pissing us off, which doesn't do anybody any good, it's also just not a potential area for solution.
It's like selling a fully automatic weapon or a semi-automatic weapon. If you let everyone sell fully automatic weapons and then you address the public and said you can't use the fully automatic, it's the same scenario.
Well, there's so many analogies. You can't buy an FM transmitter that transmits on a lot of frequencies. Why? It's not because you can't make one.
It's regulated.
Hobbies can do all kinds of stuff, right? And they do, and no one really cares because it's this little. I did work for a pirate radio station once when I was in college, so I guess that there's some examples of people actually breaking law. But for the most part, you don't even try and control it that way. You just let people do those things and don't stress about it. But you make the mass market conform to something that would fit in the way you need to fit. We talked about the altitude. Another thing that came up with that is, Jim, I think we had a conference call with Brendan Schulman. I enjoyed the name, right? I'm so sorry to say that live here, but it's Brendan Schulman, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I went with a couple of thoughts that he really helped me work out as really bad thinking on my part. One of them was, and it's just a thought exercise really, is okay, what are we trying to do here with drones? So we have a drone that basically carries a camera, and that's really this is a photography hobby. It's whatever it is. Okay, that's not Brendan's thought, that's mine, but that's just a thought here. This is really a hobby that's about photography. So somebody puts a camera on a drone that's flying all around. Well, in what ways is that different than having a camera on a really long pole?
Yeah.
I'm not giving you an answer to that because there's a lot of really interesting things you can come up with that. But it is a really good thought exercise because it sort of takes away the stigma the newness, I should say, really, of what's going on, and puts it into something that we can just understand in terms of other laws that are already out there or other ways of dealing with it. How we deal with that if somebody had some long pole technology. That you walk around. Once we accept that these drones aren't going to actually crash into your head and decapitate you, and we're not worried about that anymore, and all we're really worried about is something that's sitting in the air because it's attached to something, then it simplifies how it would solve all the problems. So I thought that was a really good thought exercise. I think it's worth thinking about as we're evaluating this problem and how to address it.
You were talking about having manufacturers use software to limit altitude and whatnot. It just so happens that 2 days ago, DJI launched their Geo systems, which is their mandatory geofencing that will be implemented. It's actually in beta version right now, and it's out there if you want to load it onto your machine for DJI Phantoms and the Inspire 1. And it has 3 different levels of geofencing. One is a warning area that just pops up and says, "Hey, you're entering," and they give the
State park.
explanation of a state park. You're entering a protected wildlife zone where blue herons are feeding their young or something like that, and you should really know this. And then you click the close button, and you either don't go in or you fly in, and it actually shows it on the map on your smartphone. The second is which gives you a real air of accountability. It gives you have to input your credit card prior to flying, and you have to acknowledge that this secondary restricted zone that you are about to enter is not. You should not be flying a drone in there. You can proceed at your own risk. Your credit card information will be used as your personal information, and your timestamp and your entire flight is actually saved, much like the FAA does now with a third-party company. And if you were to get into trouble, DJI says they would turn that information over to authorities. The third level is the restricted zone, which you cannot fly into at all, and that includes over prisons, power plants, and
Airports?
and Washington, D.C. No, airports, unless it's Class B or C directly above the Class 1 shelf or whatever, that's restricted. All the other shelves out on different class airports are warning zones, so you can fly in them if you acknowledge it with your credit card. Doesn't cost anything, but it's actually, I think, a step in the right direction for DJI owners.
And let me jump in and say Brendan Schulman is now working with DJI as their counsel. He's the one who brought this out, or at least brought it out to the public. And then also, if you want to learn more about this, go to rcgroups.com and click on the FPV button to our FPV channel, and we have an article on that up right now.
Mm-hmm. So it's actually happening. Yeah.
Well, that sounds like the step. It's a good step. It's a step taken. What I love about it, when I was listening to you, is that so many problems that the government tries to solve are really solved by the liability chain and the way liability, suits happen and the way insurance companies pay out. And so much of even aviation, so much of what the FAA at one time had to do, and the rules are still in the books because of things they had to do, are now really much more fully resolved by the insurance companies. So you can have all the rights you want to do something with your airplane. I can buy an airplane, try and fly it, if I can pay cash for it. I don't need insurance, but I have to have insurance. So what happens when I buy an airplane is the insurance company says, okay, well, good job, new airplane, here's what you got to do. You're going to fly dual instruction with this guy for 20 hours, you're going to go fly this solo, and then you're going to fly this way, and you're not going to get passengers, and then eventually, okay, you can have a passenger, and you can do this, and now eventually you get to where you can do whatever you want. It's sort of a type of regulation that's completely private, but it has to do with how if I screw up, somebody else has got to pay the bill, and they get to dictate the rules. Now, the way that could apply here is with regulation, you require insurance, and that would be a step that would could make sense to me also, because at that point that does sort of empower the AMA or some other group to make rules that then have some teeth to them, and then would be in a marketplace where we try and find the insurer who could free us of liability, but also work out for themselves what restrictions need to be placed in the activity to make liability work. In a sense, DJI has sort of taken that up to say, well, we're gonna make it so that you have to use the product responsible, and that's not just for regulations. They're doing that, I'm sure. I'm not trying to put words in their mouth, but they're doing that, I'm sure, to limit their liability and yours as you're using the product. Right. It's a smart way to deal with it. Somebody mentioned, I just have to say, a thought came up while you were talking about being near airports. One of the things that just grinded my gears so bad was when they changed, I think it was the area around an airport,
5 miles.
3 miles, and they made it 5 miles. And it just drove me nuts. Several people online were saying, well, that's only 2 more miles. No, that's an area. it's pi r squared. It went from 3 miles to 5 miles. You square the ratio. So it's a much bigger than double. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's much bigger, but it's not the same as 5/3 the area, right? 5/3 squared. So so now go ahead and go to a map sometime and do this for me if you get a chance. And it didn't say like tower airports, I don't think. It said the airports. You're supposed to call the airport manager. Go to a map. You can get what's called a sectional map online, different places, and just go ahead and put your finger, put it a little bit out, and draw a 5-mile radii around every single airport in the country, and tell me what area you're left with. There is just not a bit of area that has a human being anywhere near it. There are definitely places in the country, I've flown over them, where there aren't airports, but there's nobody there.
Yeah.
All the airports are where all the people are. So that basically made it, at that moment there, made it illegal to fly model airplanes at all without calling somebody. And now what's fun is, I thought we joked around about, well, what we should do is just we just, as RC groups, just get on the phone and call every damn one. Wouldn't that be funny? Just call every airport, because not a single one of them would know what to do with this. They would ask them, hey, can I fly a model airplane within 5 miles of the airport? What would they say? Who the hell are you? Go away. That's one possibility. The other possibility, the only other possibility, is no. No, you can't. Well, then what happens? It didn't say we had to get the permission.
Right.
Notify it. They can't do anything about it. It's just exactly, it's just a senseless step in the wrong direction. I took us on a tangent.
Hey, to all our live listeners, in the upper right-hand corner, there is a button that will allow you to ask questions. And if you have any questions you would like to ask anyone here, feel free to type those up. I'll see them if they pop up, and we'll be happy to answer them. So, Jim, one thing I've been thinking would be really cool with this 0.55 pound concept is that Matt, Jason, and myself are going to start building sub-sized FPV craft.
Yep.
So Matt's got a wing in the works that'll come in below that number.
I do, yeah. It's a ready-made RC MS composite 26-inch flying wing, high-performance wing. This is not your ultra-micro indoor stuff. It's fully outside capable. Basically, you're going to get the same thrills as you would with any larger FPV plane. It's just under 5.5 pounds, and this is going to be 5.8. Now, we're not going to have an HD camera on board it because it's just going to go over the weight.
Under 0.55, not 5.5.
Under 0.55, I apologize. And yeah, it's going to be a good flying wing that's actually going to have some duration to it. So it's being shipped to me now. We're working with Ready Made RC on this review/build. And we're going to start a whole trend of under 2 sticks of butter. Yeah, under 2 sticks of butter size.
That is a crazy limit, by the way. That's just a crazy.
It is.
Really look, first of all, that's great, man. I'm sorry, I moved on too fast, but I just had this great emotional reaction to this 2 sticks of butter idea. 2 sticks of butter moving at 200 miles an hour, it's devastating. It doesn't matter how, the idea that we just look at the weight, and that's a dumb weight. The weight should be much higher.
Oh yeah.
It's really cool that people are going to make things smaller. That's really fun. But there's more danger in flying something you can't see very well. It forces you into FPV and relying on FPV if you can't see it very well. So I don't think that's actually a very safe thing.
If anything changes, it's got to be that minimum number. If anything changes,
that is a crazy thing because it puts way too many things in the class of things that the FAA has to worry about from their own perspective. It's a crazy number. They've got to increase that.
Well, they don't have to worry about it, and that's what's kind of funny is they're relying on local law enforcement to enforce this. And I've heard reports already of people getting harassed by local sheriffs and police officers saying, "Where's your registration number?" because they're flying an airplane in their backyard.
Yeah,
that in itself is dangerous. I've heard that as well. Now the FAA apparently has sent out to law enforcement this cheat sheet on if you see somebody flying, you approach them and ask them for their registration number, and it's already happened to a few people, and that in itself is one of the main problems I have is that you have Johnny Law pulling people over when he sees a model airplane. Not everyone, okay? This isn't, but it has happened, okay? There's a few instances around the country, but those few instances have already gotten some media attention.
the thing that's the worst for all of us here and all the modelers out there is the villainization of RC aircraft. And I listen to all the podcasts at night, and I've heard multiple stories of some lady down the street saying you're flying that illegal drone. So
we went down to, we have what we call Flugtags, which just means flying in German.
Yeah.
Cute thing we do at night each year. We went to the flying field and flying all these model airplanes, and an old couple was sitting in the car watching us and having a good time. We talked a little bit, and then we got out a quadcopter, and somebody flew it around. And she said, "Well, I guess that's okay as long as you're flying it here." Which I thought was really funny, because we've been flying model aircraft that could have killed somebody really easily. But that was the thing that really frightened her, was that we brought that out, and she wanted to make sure we weren't going to fly it anywhere else. And I just think that is, I think we have to realize that's a very temporary, and that's part of our really fickle, social society that gets really caught up in certain things at certain times, and 5 years later doesn't care about it at all. And some of that we should just let go, because I don't think people do see RC aircraft the way they see drones. I know it doesn't make any sense to us. It hurts our brains to look at this way. But we have to see the public understands these things to be completely different. They're not the same.
Yeah, it's the multi-rotors get a really bad name ahead of the fixed wing. And I do a lot of fixed wing FPV, and I have never really gotten the negative press. A couple times I did. I think, okay, so I always fly at this field, and there's these, I fly at a schoolyard sometimes, and there were some workers there. I think Jim and I talked about this. And I flew the day before with those workers watching me, and I flew FPV, fixed wing FPV, and they're like, "Oh, look, an airplane," and then I went about my way. And I came back the next day, and the guys are there working on the roof of the school. This is during the summer, no kids there. And got out the quadcopter and flew it, and the second I put it in the air, they're like, "Hey, Frank, this guy's got one of those GD drone things," and they all came over, and I thought they were gonna rough me up. I really did. They were literally cussing. That it was scary. And there's your perception. There's your.
So what you do is you take those people and you say, "Hey, do you guys remember? I know you're really bothered by this right now, but do you remember when Elvis was shaking his hips on TV? That was."
Boy, yeah.
I can't believe that happened, Or do you remember when they burned the Beatles albums? Man, I'm so glad they had those big piles of Beatles albums that are burning, because what the Beatles were doing. I'm so glad we're, keeping up on the latest things to be offended about, because it really is so much of this in that category, that area. That has, people will be just fine. And you know who's going to know that? You know who's going to understand that at a really deep level? Young people. They, at a very deep level, this is something that, as far as they're concerned, will have been around their entire lives, and is a useful tool that has its place. And also, young people will grow up just understanding that you can't be an idiot and fly through the streets of Manhattan with a camera around. That you can't be a moron, because
you can't put it on YouTube.
And put it on YouTube, I mean, hey, I'm glad people did that in a way, because it's sort of like everything that's bad is really good, is sort of a theory here, where all the bad stuff that happens, it forces a dialogue, then creates solutions, and they're painful to go through. But hey, people have to do these crazy things so we can get to the solutions. God bless them, really. But at the same time, there aren't going to be as many people that are going to misunderstand what that means to people, because we've had a dialogue, and they're going to grow up and get that understanding, and we won't have that culturally. That promise won't be there very much. It'll be like if somebody is speeding way too fast on it, the rest of the laws are already there. The liability, all that stuff will be there to take care of the way that we understand laws to take care of. Driving 120 miles an hour down a residential area, or driving drunk, or those kinds of things. It'll be understood to be irresponsible, which it is. It absolutely is.
I've got a question for a Matt, not Matt, but a different Matt, and it says, "I live in the UK, but I imagine whatever ends up happening over there will only be copied over here. I haven't heard what any of the big RC companies are doing. Surely this legislation won't help business, and surely Horizon Hobby and such should do more."
Well, they have already. I think Ireland has announced drone registration plans, and Germany.
Are they the CAA? Is that the correct Jim Bourke? Is it the Civil Aviation Authority over there, CAA?
I can't remember. I mean, I should know, but I think CAA. I don't know.
Russia enacted the same laws as the U.S. as well.
Yeah, so more countries over in Europe are seemingly adopting this idea of drone registration. But should the manufacturers and companies kind of bond together in this one voice to complain?
But what's their perspective? Their perspective is, we can go ahead and hire our attorneys, or come together with our competitors to hire attorneys to fight something that everybody seems to want and that we're not being listened to about anyway. I mean, that's just a really long shot thing. Or we just kind of do what the market needs and wait it out and comply. I mean, really complying is the way that, despite how people understand businesses, that they work in these really mysterious and horrible ways, for the most part, it's just people like what we're doing right now, sitting and talking about stuff, and a lot of the conversations about, well, how do we comply with this stupid thing? Okay, comply. And that's what they'll do. And they're more, in fact, they are much more likely just to go along with it than Joe Public is.
I hear stories about the CAA or European authority having a really level head and and they've actually accepted drones and commercial operations to an extent. I read about it all the time in RC groups and the forums. So I don't know if they're gonna copy what the FAA has done. Maybe the Canadian CAA would go a different route with that. But I think I was under the assumption that the UK had already had a set plan that allowed commercial UAV operations for hire, and they weren't messing with the hobbyists.
The only country in Europe, and actually let's just say Europe and Asia, in fact, let's just say the rest of the world almost, that has a really strong aviation heritage that's still alive is France. I'd be very interested to see how France resolves it, but I guess they're part of the European administration, still do whatever, what they do. But they're just, in the U.S., we have a very unique situation because not only do we have a very widespread country, there's a lot of airlines flying all the time to get people from place to place because they just need to move long distances they couldn't possibly drive. But we also have a lot of private pilots. There's a lot of just general aviation going on. That's just not the way it is in other countries. So in some ways, I could see possibly they may not see the threat to the aviation system in other countries because there just isn't as much going on. I don't know, but I could see that going either way. But I do think the question asked by the person who, by Matt, I think he's right. I think the assumption in that question is correct, that what the FAA does, the other agencies will just widely follow because it sets a precedent. And unfortunately, I'm really sorry, that we are doing such a terrible job over here. And it's true that probably the horrible job that we're doing is probably going to propagate around the world. And then it will become, at that point, the argument is, well, this is how everybody else is doing it as well, and especially if you're doing it in Europe. But I got to tell you, once you Europeans decide to do something, may not know this, but in the U.S., that's a really strong political argument. This is how they do it in Europe. We should do it like that here. You probably have the opposite. You probably have, this is how they do it in the U.S. We should do it that way here. But comically, we reverse that here, I guess, because we would be likely to do whatever you do. So if you get more stringent, it'll probably be this like one-upmanship.
Till it's this vacuum with nothing flying.
Yeah, we don't want to fall behind, in our state-of-the-art regulations. So who knows how that's going to go? I want to go back to I want to leave everybody at the end of this thing as much as I can, feeling more resolved than they did before. I don't want to leave. I don't think this emotional stir is doing them any good. But having said that, it is a bad situation that we should be upset about.
Yeah, the fact that I can go out and fly a powered paraglider ultralight aircraft within rules and restrictions that are in place for that, but not have to register it.
No register. Yeah, or you can fire a bullet. I mean, bullets less than 5 pounds.
Yeah.
All three of us own 45 pistols.
What's funny is I brought that to somebody I know very well. Well, I have to register. That makes sense. Well, it doesn't make sense. You have to register guns. Oh, sure you do. No, you don't have to register guns. Oh, yeah, I think you do.
No, you don't.
Well, that's a funny thing, If you have the perspective, if you're American, the perspective has become that you're going to have to register everything. Well, then that probably does make sense. One of the guys here, he came down. We were talking about it here in his office, and I mentioned this thing. He goes, well, that's just how America is. You just have to register things here. That's just how this country is.
Oh,
What
gosh.
the hell are you talking about? It is absolutely not the way this country is. That is such an offensive thought. I didn't grow up in this country thinking that. And he's younger, of course. Is that how you understand? Oh, yeah, I think that's how we do things here. It doesn't always make a lot of sense, but that's just how we do things. Whoa, man, right to the gut, That's not how I see things at all.
Yeah. I just don't like the part where I have to attach a registration number to all my aircraft. No, I have seen some people have fun with this and create like airplane license plate tags where they give you, they do this 3D printed tag with your number on it or something, and you can Velcro it to all your aircraft. I just think it's hokey. Like, I don't want to print out a piece of paper and tape it on all my airplanes. I want something. I'd rather have something electronic.
I'll just put them on my LiPos. I was thinking a QR code on the side of your plane might be cool.
Yeah, or like a little miniature black box or something that has the information in it. It's electronic. It's not something that's hokey, cheesy, like I taped this to my airplane thing. That just bugs me, but that's an aesthetic thing.
Yeah, I don't mind putting the number inside the plane somewhere, because a few years ago I started putting my telephone number and a reward offer for if this plane is found, reward if found, please call this telephone number, and that's all I put on the inside of every single aircraft, and that way I can actually get back my investment when it crashes, and heaven forbid it ends up in an intersection.
This hobby has some beginnings that I think a lot of people are aware of that I think are relevant today. And I wasn't around for a lot of this, but the way that the whole club system started, and the way the AMA really started, is that at one time you had to have a license in order to operate radio equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And that license wasn't expensive or anything, but it did require passing a test and paying a fee and becoming certified or registered to be a radio operator. And that was just enough of a hassle that a lot of people didn't want to do it. So what they did instead is they became a club, and they were able to use the license of somebody else. And that's really, as I understand the history of this, that's really a lot of how the AMA started and all the club structure started. And it's part of the reason why the club structure has had trouble, is because there hasn't been that reason for the last 40 years, whatever, for them to be there. And it's only now about just being together. But see, all the competition, sometimes people wonder why the AMA, why is it even like this? Well, the reason that all happened is because everybody's coming together. They had to be together to use the frequencies. They had to be part of the club. They had to go through all that, and then they were all together, so they had competitions with each other, trying to one up each other, and that created this whole system that has, over the last, especially 20 years since the internet's come about, 15 years, has just sort of the slow unraveling process of the clubs. And it's sort of the AMA at one time here kind of feeling like it wasn't really as valuable as it was. And now, of course, that's not the case with all the work they're trying to do with the FAA. But that is an interesting thing. I think it sort of parallels what's going on now, because if the registration process, if it were only shared, if I could get a license and share it, it would actually, in some ways, I think I wouldn't like it still. But it had that effect that it turned out that the hobby thrived under this regulation that was really, by a lot of people, seemed too onerous to comply with individually. So just a thought that no matter what happens, we're still going to find a way to enjoy what we enjoy.
Yeah.
And the craziest part is they're going to limit our airfields when the major problem can be taken off from anywhere. Why even mess with airfields when the real problem?
Well, why do you say that? I must be aware of something. What is it they're doing to limit the airfields?
Well, like they're shutting down airfields within a 30-mile radius of D.C.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I get that, but that's line of sight RC pilots. It has nothing to do with the real problem.
More than 600 feet away from themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. The problem is a guy with an FPV drone that can launch out of any parking lot.
I just think, it's look, if you have you buy a GPS chip online, you can buy it anywhere, right? And you can make your own circuitry. You can do whatever you want with it. And you can buy a microchip that you can program to do things. And I hope I'm not going to watch us for saying this, but darn it, it's not that hard to put those things together. But what they do is, if you sell the GPS chip, if you manufacture the GPS chip, then you're required to. I think it's in the chip. I don't think it's the satellite. Yeah, it's in the chip. That you can't give the highest resolution. If the GPS is reporting internally that the vehicle is moving, the GPS is moving at a certain speed or above, it has to give bad data. It can no longer give good GPS coordinates. Now, why? Well, that's obviously because they want someone to make a miss. But the point is that that's how they solve the problem with somebody making a freaking missile. That's a lot harder than making a model airplane, right? And so I think the idea that you're going to control these problems by, but the government's idea that they're going to control these problems by limiting tons and tons of people is extremely foolish. It requires a real overreach, and it's not something that we should be very tolerant of as citizens. It's too easy to abuse that. We should not be handing over to the government that kind of power over us. So that's, I think, where you're coming from. Now I understand with the idea about the airfields. Yeah, I totally agree with you. That's nonsensical.
You're decentralizing these groups that are together and camaraderie, and they're all in one place. And then if you take those places away, they'll be everywhere.
And it's simply
what recourse do we have that actually means something besides posting on the internet? I mean, besides this lawsuit, somebody stepped up and is paying the money and is suing the FAA over this. That's a legality issue. But what if it is legal and we still don't agree with it as a by and large RC community? What do we do about that?
Well, there's two schools of thoughts. You stand up for America and you don't sign it, and you see all these posts that say stand up for your rights, don't sign anything, don't give in to the pressures. And then the other school of thought is, you know what, life will go on, I will continue to fly my model airplanes, and I'm going to sign up and get my registration number. And I see that on Facebook all the time. All of my friends that fly RC, not all of them, but the ones that have signed up, they all sort of parrot the same exact response on Facebook. They go, well, I did it, and that wasn't so hard. Life goes on. You know?
It reminds me of because I fly over the mountains a lot, I have a personal locator beacon. That goes in my flight suit when I fly. And if I ever had to bail out, I'll survive because I have a parachute. But I might be hanging a tree for a week, So I have this personal, which would be no fun at all. So I have this personal locator beacon. It's got a little antenna. If I pull the antenna out, it sends a signal, and the rescuers can find me. And why am I telling you that? Well, the reason I'm telling you that is because in the box with the personal locator beacon is a registration card. And you are required by law to register those personal locator beacons, or else you have a fine. But the thing is, that fine is actually quite a bit less than the cost of being rescued. If you actually are rescued, I've worked this out. If you actually are rescued, you're going to get a bill, and they're going to take a helicopter in, they're going to save you, and all this stuff. And if I register it, and I actually pull the antenna on accident, or my kid does it, or it gets caught in my zipper as I put it in there, then I'm going to get a bill. I don't know how much the bill's going to be. It's going to be a bill. It's going to be a serious bill, because the helicopter might show up 10 minutes later for all I know. So, should you register? And do people register? I cannot imagine that anybody does anything with that card but throws in the trash. I just can't imagine anybody does. I'm not going to tell you what I did. It's a secret. But I just can't imagine that anybody actually fills it out, goes to time, fills it. I am the guy who owns this ID of locator beacon, and if it goes off, please come and find me. Here's my address and phone number, and send me the bill because I did it. It doesn't make sense to me. So, so what's going to happen when people open their drone after Christmas and you have a registration card in there next year? I would think probably the exact same thing. Does that mean that I'm going to avoid registering? No. Everybody who works for me is going to comply with the law or be let go, because that's the law. And unfortunately, all these stupid laws, this is what happens is we get more and more of a burden that has no real, that doesn't really create a benefit for anybody. But it's still something we're going to comply with because that's the law. And we're not going to advocate. I mean, it's just not, we're flat out not going to tell somebody, and we shouldn't tell anybody. This is why RCGroups is great, because everybody else gets to talk about stuff freely. Right. We're not going to go out and tell people, hey, don't sign up, don't register. That's a silly position for us to take.
But that's what the FAA says.
No, well, it's not required yet.
Right. Yeah. I know. Yeah.
They're not saying it as a matter of civil disobedience. And I would, by the way, I think there's a great place for civil disobedience all over the place, and I think that's perfectly reasonable. But I'm not going to tell somebody. I'm not going to use my platform to advocate that.
Well, let's start wrapping this up. Tomorrow we're supposed to have John from Ready Made RC. I'm sorry, Tim from Ready Made RC on the live chat. So we're going to talk to him and get his views. Does anyone have some last thoughts they want to throw out there before we jump?
Yeah, I would say even despite the skies are cloudy, for lack of a better cliche term, but don't let that dampen your hobby. So many people have said, I'm through, I'm out. I keep seeing it all the time in forums and on social media that they're just going to quit flying and start doing whatever else they do on the side, crochet or I don't know what, but don't let that stop you. Just have a good time, fly your model airplanes, fly your drones, fly whatever you want to call it, and tomorrow will be another day, and you'll still have your transmitter in your hand, and you'll still be able to walk outside and fly your planes.
That's really well said. I would say that anybody who fills out a registration form and sends in $5 and enjoys it, no, who doesn't hate it, you got to think about that a little bit. But you should all do it. You should do it and hate it. You should just hate every minute of it and enjoy the hate. Just get into it. Go crazy. If you say, and I agree with what you said, Matt, but I kind of like when people go, oh yeah, well, I'm not even going to say this is my last word of this subject. I'm done playing you. I just think that's so fun. And then, of course they're going to come back. Okay, well, I still don't agree because this is why. They collect themselves. They come back. Hey, that's the emotion of the situation. It's really fun to watch everybody go through that. Enjoy that too. Just knock yourselves out. Get as mad as you need to because it is frustrating. Enjoy it, but do what the law says because it's just not worth it. I don't think it's personally worth the trouble to try and to try and avoid it.
Yeah.
Well, I have news on Jason Cole. Jason, I'm going to go ahead and let the cat out of the bag.
Uh-oh.
Jason's mortgaging his house, and he's going to start his own lawsuit against the FAA. Right?
Nice.
Yeah.
What I thought would be fun, Jim, what this is the civil disobedience I would do, and I know you want to close up here. What I thought would be very fun would be to put an ad in the paper announcing that I would be flying a 0.56-pound drone without registering it.
Beautiful. I love the idea.
I would register everything else, but this would be a really fun thing to do. I am going to be at this position in space and time. I will be doing this thing that breaks the law. And if you're going to try and fight the lawsuit, I think that's where you start. Is you just ratchet that up and do it and enjoy it, have a good spirit about it, then let them come to you. And if you're going to be brave to do it, they come to you, they give you the fine, and then you fight them.
Gotcha.
That's how civil disobedience works to me. It's better than just not registering. Register and then break the law if you're going to do it. Now, I'm not advocating that. I might choose to do it for myself, but that doesn't mean anybody out there should do it.
Sure.
But if you do,
I'm not being coy. I mean that. Don't do that because that's stupid. But I can be stupid for myself, and I like. Don't you guys?
Well, I know personally, I am excited to see where the lawsuit goes and other lawsuits that are pending to get hashed out in the court system, and then I am going to be waiting until the last day, February 19th. If there's no resolution by that day, then I will register at that time to comply.
As am I.
Holding off until it is that date.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, we have another Hangout/podcast coming up, and when we have the podcast, these two will be joined together. So if you're listening to us on iTunes, we have a second piece that's about to come up, and I just heard a crazy animal.
I thought I heard that too.
There it is.
Oh no!
Did you roll over the dog's tail with your?
Is that dog's name Cookie or Spicy or something with the Y on the end?
I lost my microphone, but
you can't even fly a dog. Why would you have that?
It's radio controlled.
That's a manly critter you got there, boss.
But I also want to thank, once again, this is our first live Hangout. It's going to YouTube, so you can check it out there. Thank our podcast sponsor, Hobby King at hobbyking.com. Go check them out. I've got the Durafly back here, which we should talk about at some point, Jason. We have the review of that just went up. And anyway, more tomorrow. Then it's all going to be stuck together in one big podcast. So check us out. Come back online and hang out and ask some questions. That would be awesome. Thank you guys for joining us during your busy day.
Bye. Thank you.
Yep.
RCGroups.com. I'm turning off the button now.